Over the weekend and last week, if you remember, we talked to John McLean, Wellington lawyer, about the Substack he writes. Well, over the weekend, he decided to get stuck into, you'd have to say, another of our public figures and in McLean Musings. And he had a crack. I'll introduce him first of all, and then we'll talk about what he said. John, welcome to the show. Nice to have you on, mate.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Michael.
Have you been to the Wellington train station and seen that particular sculpture that I was talking about?
Yeah, it's terrific, isn't it?
It's magnificent, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, the wahine is particularly uplifted and uplifting. Yeah.
She is stunning. Let's be honest about it. Yeah. Who would have thought that, 3 months on a Kontiki type operation floating around in the bottom of the South Pacific could deliver you a figure like that?
Yeah, it's the seafood diet, presumably.
Mind you, Coupe looks pretty good too. He's pretty fit and chiselled. He'd do what, coming out of a gym somewhere. All right, no, Mr. Trathui obviously enjoyed the male and the female form. I shouldn't say any more than that. Listen, over the weekend you published another of your Substacks, but it was in relation to, as I understand it, a book. And the book that has come out by the former Race Relations Commissioner and also world chess champion Susan Devoy, Dame Susan Devoy. She's published a book.
Like that one.
Yes, well, she's published a book in which she basically talks about herself and her role. A new memoir is called Dame Susie D, in which she reflects on her life. So it's an autobiography. And she talks about her time as, it's called Dame Susie D, My Story, an impossibly photo-shopped front cover. It's published by Allen and Unwin. Blunt, honest, wise and warm, the supportive blurb says about this particular thing, but she also talks about her time as the race relations conciliator. This has prompted you, in a pejorative piece, it has to be said, John, to describe her as Dame Susan Devoid, not Dame Susan Devoy, and hop in. What was the basis for your criticism there, my friend?
It was quite a quick little Substack there, but I thought it brought into stark relief some of the debates that we are having about merit for positions, and you've touched this morning on Grant Robertson's appointment to the Vice Chancellorship in Otago, and Devoy's appointment as Race Relations Commissioner, and whether she was qualified for the position by virtue of, well, whatever. Certainly playing squash doesn't help. It's not clear why she was appointed. She seems to think that the criticism of her appointment was because she was a white-skinned sportswoman. The irony probably lost on her is that was probably why she was appointed, rather than, Anyway, I find her a little annoying at times.
Yes, I've never quite worked out. She was chief executive of Sport Bay of Plenty. That's what she did after, apparently, she left squash. She actually stood and got elected to a district health board, but resigned because she left to take up this job, as I understand, as chief executive of Sport Bay of Plenty, which is sort of understandable. And then, oddly enough, went from that job straight to the New Zealand Race Relations Commissioner, and was appointed in 2013. She succeeded Joris de Brest for the position of Race Relations Commissioner in 2013. Now, that was a John Key appointment, it would have been, yeah?
Yep. Yeah.
As she was actually selected by Justice Minister Judith Collins, who was later forced to defend the appointment, I have to say, because nobody could actually understand why she got the job. But then...
Yeah, I think she... Sorry.
But then my understanding, and I remember sitting there going, how the hell do you go from playing squash to being, in a position like that? No one really knew, and it was never satisfactorily explained. She then became, it seemed to me, one of the most archly woke individuals I've ever come across.
Yeah, she certainly bought into that ticket, which was a strange one, but and actually playing the victim, as she seems to be playing in some way, or trying to play here, is in relation to criticism of her appointment, is classic sort of wokeism, isn't it? That I'm somehow, in relation to these very fortunate appointments, a victim of some sort of clique of nasty people.
Yes. She feels very sorry for herself in a book. She said that she didn't enjoy the job. She wasn't really, but I mean, the real reason is she wasn't in politics, was she? She didn't really understand the nature of the work. And then, as I remember when she was appointed, looking at the Race Relations Commission office and looking at all the photos of the people who worked for the Race Relations Commission office 10 years ago, John, and thinking, oh my God, this is a freak show. I couldn't go to a freak show and see people like that. I was pretty sure they had to be made up. They all seemed to be wearing prosthetics, and they had all different coloured hair, and they all had different ideas. They took her over, and they turned this not very bright squash player and sporty person into their mouthpiece. That's my impression. Is that yours?
Yes, I think so. To such a, I think it's a fair assessment. I think under previous commissioners, the Hiwi Tauroa and these sorts of people, the whole emphasis was on trying to create universalist narratives where you try and downplay the significance of race and trying to get people to get on and not say nasty things, racist things, and then it became suddenly almost completely the reverse, where race became an identifier of your sort of deep persona, and all these races were somehow battling out against each other, which is an anathema, really, and totally contrary to how the position should work.
She also bought in very quickly into the idea that British colonisers of this country were responsible for a great deal of institutional racism, and yet had never uttered these thoughts before in her life, rather sort of confirming the impression that she'd been captured.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she was probably pretty fertile ground to be impregnated with these sorts of thoughts.
Yes, well, when you're not very bright, you are. Now, the other thing, though, you criticised her over was that she criticised Prime Minister John Key for failing to meet with the president of the Islamic Associations, Anwar Ghani, about Islamic extremism. In fact, she said it's not good enough. He owes the Muslim community an explanation, and then argued that Islam people or Muslims in this country were being ethnically or racially discriminated against. And that has really upset you.
Well, I think that's where she really betrayed herself. Whatever else Islam is, and whatever attitude you may have towards Islam, it's certainly not a race by any definition. It's a belief system. It would be like saying that all Christians are a race or something. It's so far off the mark that it really demonstrated to me that she was well short on the sort of critical thinking and nuance that's required to perform credibly a role as Race Relations Commissioner.